and growth and the big changing world and how do you cope. The announcer did most of my work because she read the description of the session and she also read the introduced the panelists. So I think that we're ready to go. I think one of the things I just would remind all of you and I will remind myself and remind my panelists that we're actually having the China meeting in Vietnam. So this is really a China meeting, but we, of course, we'll talk about Vietnam and other issues, but we're going to discuss China. So in fact, with that, I'm going to start with Dwayne and talk about the situation in China and your perspective as private equity with investments mainly in China, in-country investments. Where do you see China now? And, there's so much coverage, particularly in the Western media, that's kind of negative about the economy, that even to the point of China has peaked. So tell us, what is your perspective on China and its continuing dynamism?
All right, thank you. So good afternoon. Again, my name is Dwayne Fong. Before I get into that, just a couple words on Ximing, the fund, so that you have the context of what we do and what kind of companies we deal with. Ximing is a venture capital fund, primarily investing in China. We're probably one of the more prominent or bigger, whatever term you like to use it, or more active firms in China. The firm is set up in 2006. So in a way to Al's question, what we have seen in terms of startup environments and the operating environments, economies, and so on and so forth, that has gone through a couple of cycles in the past. And we currently are managing approximately 10 billion US dollars of AUM. And since we invest fairly early in two primary sectors, a technology sector and a healthcare sector, since we invest early, so we've done quite a number of deals since the beginning. We have a total, we invested around 500 plus companies over the last couple of decades. And I would say in today's environment, we do see new and different challenges that we have not seen in the past. But if we run our business and our daily life just simply by looking at TV sets, I don't want to name it. I was going to say which TV station that we tend to,
which publication,
right? Then you can't, nothing gets done. So I guess my message is it's a glass half empty, half full. And in terms of the opportunity set and dynamism, there are a few points I want to make. First of all, the Chinese entrepreneurial and innovative spirit is as high as ever. Despite all the headlines in international coverage and so on, when I started making investments in China, there are a few things that we didn't see back then, which we saw in plentiful today. Entrepreneurs that are seasoned and experienced founders. In the early days, founders tend to be an inspirational, maybe visionary founder who couldn't hold a job in his prior company, and therefore he's founding a new company. But these days, we do have founders who have gone through many different stages of career life, very seasoned, very experienced. Not only that, we also have seasoned executives who are able to come in and help manage these companies. So on the entrepreneurial side, and then on the innovation side, We invest a lot in AI, just as other parts of the developed world. We invest a lot in AI. We invest quite a bit in the automotive space, autonomous driving and EVs and many of the sensors that go into these gadgets. And so on. So we can kind of get into more of it.
Can I just ask you quickly, if two things that many people who are concerned about what's going on in the Chinese economy they bring up is one is the property sector, and the other is debt. I'm wondering if very briefly you could deal with those two issues as current challenges from your perspective.
Great question. The property, the real estate sector is in a major, in a substantial pullback for sure. And real estate did represent a fairly sizable chunk of the Chinese GDP. So when that's in real estate, I live in Shanghai. I think my return from being a venture capitalist is quite good. But the house I bought, that return is even better. So real estate prices have indeed gone through the roof over the last 10, 15 years. So that can no longer sustain itself. And however, I think the saving grace in this whole real estate correction is that the individual homeowner leverage is quite safe because of the high upfront payment demand by commercial banks. So when I was talking to central bank officials and governors in China, the message is it's extremely unlikely that the real estate crisis will become a banking crisis with ripple effects through the economy. So that's so real estate down, challenging, but it's never going to go back to the same height.
And debt?
But not likely to be. On the debt side, the local government financing vehicle has taken out fairly substantial debts over the last few years, last say decades. But a lot of most of the local government vehicle debts went into infrastructure projects. And if we partition those infrastructure projects into coastal provinces projects and hinterland projects, then the hinterland projects might be challenged. But the bulk of the coastal provinces and so on will more likely to have somewhat of a cash flow issue rather than a quality of asset issue. So again, from PBOC's point of view, hearing it indirectly, they do not believe the central government lacks the ability to service these local debts. It is more of a willingness because of so that local governments would have to first come up with their own way of servicing the local debts, but then, after all, central government still has plenty of resources to do it.
So one of the things that I think which comes out is with China, I think the model that one must think about is that there's political centralization, but in many ways in the economic sphere, there's a lot of decentralization.
More decentralized.
And the provinces and municipalities and have a lot of autonomy to pursue their policies in the economic sphere, and that often runs some of them. So, for another perspective on China and the dynamism, let's turn to Zhang Suzhou. You've been here with Haier, and you can introduce Haier to the audience, but of course I've known Haier as my washing machine and all these things are well known. But you've been here
I lived
7
here
years.
7 years already.
And Hire has actually been here 12 years, you were
Yes.
telling me. So, in fact, Hire's presence here predates all of the geopolitics and, so it's really gone back to the early days of China plus one thinking, right? Which predates the tariff wars and all of that sort of thing. So tell us, why are you here and, how do you approach the work that you do here in Vietnam?
Okay, thank you. This question is a public question or personal question? Okay, so let me introduce myself. I live in here 3 years or 7 years. And my service company is high growth. I think many guys come from India or many global worlds. We use a different brand in different regions. So here we use Alpha brand. Why come here? Because our hair group wants stay in Vietnam. Okay, our target, our purpose to stay in Vietnam. By the province, so we want to do business number one for the globalization. Vietnam is a strategic market for hair group. This means that we have the 0.1 million population, so we need to focus on the opportunity to stay and live up. This means we are the best for the Vietnam consumer reception, consumer requirement. So we do the business for the washing machine, refrigerator, air conditioner. Now performance in Vietnam, washing machine already reached number one, 21% market share, and refrigerators 18% number top two for market share. We are very proud to share here. This is why I'm still here. Thank you so much.
So, when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that the products that Hire makes here, 70% of it is for the Vietnam market, and 30% for outside of Vietnam in the region.
Another, we rebuild the supply chain. Okay, so for brand, for company, we rebuild supply chain in localization. So we built the supply chain here. We focus on the ASEAN countries, not only for domestic market. So we do in this section, this factory, we not focus on the America. We focus on the ASEAN countries and the domestic market. This means the regional supply chain manufacturers.
You mentioned Indonesia and Thailand as a key
Yes,
market.
in Indonesia and Thailand, we also have the industry park manufacture the refrigerator, washing machine, or today or air conditioner, but we separate the different segments, different categories. For example, refrigerators, we produce the double door here, and the side by side, and four door we make in Thailand. These are segment the category difference.
So I'm wondering if just before we move on to Johan, if you could talk a little bit about, because the impression many people might have is that Hire has come here in order to take advantage of, this is a different market, not subject to the tariffs on China goods, and that therefore you can then attack you can approach the US market or Western markets, but you don't. And indeed, as you were explaining, and maybe it's useful for the audience to understand, that Hire products, appliances in the US are generally under the GE brand. So they come across me more as French or.
Let me introduce the airport strategy in the US. We also do market share about 20%. We use GE brand, GE appliances. So we M&A, but we do the cooperation with the GE in the GE brand, but operation by Apple. This means we keep the market of our market. The operation by local person in America. Where the products come from for the America? Very your question, right? Normally, the supply chain most come from Singapore, from Mexico and the USA. We have three manufacturing base in Mexico. We have one manufacturing base in America. So this is why we call the localization the regional strategy. But you know why we do this? Because of the consumer climate, different country, different region, different requirement. For example, America, it looks like a big refrigerators, more than 400 liters. But in Vietnam, normally they be like 300 liters. In America, in China, we focus on the 400 and 500 liters. The different style also, the capacity, even the style difference. In China, we use a bottom mount. As America, we use a side by side. But in Vietnam, we use a top mount. It's very interesting. The product range is different. So this is why we do the different regional and the localization zone.
So in a one sort of way, you actually have a strategy that is resilient to the geopolitical winds. In other words, we're now seeing all the geopolitical factors. But Haier implemented this kind of regional strategy well in advance, and therefore it must be to your advantage.
You mean
the regional strategy, the fact that you are.
For example, in Vietnam,
Yeah.
we use a program and also the time driven, time production driven, and in European, we do the candy and hair. In Pakistan and Indonesia, India, we use a hair brand. So the brand strategy all different. The first question, the first item. Second, the branding positioning difference. Okay, so in GE, normally we use middle brand. Aqua we use a middle to high brand. Even China, we can use the brand. China, we have a Kasadi, we have a Haier, we have a layer, many brands to separate the different requirement of segment, the consumer group.
Interesting strategy. Now, Johan, if I might, if you could talk a bit about the environment now in Vietnam, the business environment, business climate, particularly in the context of the China-Vietnam relationship. And of course, this has been driven in recent years because of the geopolitics, but I think it predates that really. Talk a bit about
I totally agree. I don't think it's driven by geopolitics so much. Of course, that's has been one of the factors lately, but we can cite so many examples of corporates from China investing earlier in Vietnam. One of them. But I think the Chinese companies coming into the self shop is a natural course of development, growth from their own perspective, from their own strategies. And they are just a couple of steps behind the Koreans and the Japanese who have done it maybe 20, 30 years earlier. I think it's all natural because if you look at the growth and the development of the brands, the global brands, you can see that the Americans and the Europeans come first, and they have gradually evolved into setting up manufacturing bases and diversifying their supply chains overseas, outside of their own home country. For example, the US went to South America or Mexico, matter, and the Koreans, actually, to begin with, I think maybe the Japanese went to Korea, and then both the Japanese and the Koreans went to China, and then to Vietnam. So it's just a natural course of corporate growth rather than geopolitics, I would imagine. But it's driven by in my view, I think it's driven by the globalization of the consumer brands. So to speak, we're talking about manufacturing of consumer products here. Electronics are a big chunk of it. So we have seen, as I mentioned, the biggest, probably the biggest manufacturing base of a global consumer brand, Samsung. We have set up shop quite a few years ago, and now they are the biggest investor in Vietnam. that respect. And so I think the next phase, I think we have seen some Thai and maybe Malaysia, regionally speaking, have set up manufacturing bases in Vietnam, but because they don't own global brands, I think we have seen somewhat of a limited existence from those brands and from those companies in Vietnam. I think the biggest up and coming global brands have to be from China. We have seen BYD, for example. And so recently we have seen Chery, probably the second biggest electric car manufacturer from China, who have signed a commitment to put money into Vietnam in the billions of dollars. So I think that's the first phase. And of course, Chery is not going to make cars only for the Vietnam market, because the Vietnam market's automobile market is still very limited. So I think Chery can set up a manufacturing base in Vietnam to make cars for the region outside of China, I would imagine, in a similar way as Highway has done for their products in the past, and then maybe in the future Xiaomi to come. And I think those are the next step in the development of the strategy of globalization, of globalizing the manufacturing of products from the global brands.
So are we seeing, given the more recent geopolitical challenges, are we seeing Chinese companies using them in a significant way as a platform to avoid the issues related to if you're exporting directly from China?
The Chinese companies have not done so directly. For example, in the case of Foxconn, who is a sort of like a global
Foxconn in India, right?
well, Foxconn of Taiwan, Foxconn in China, Foxconn of wherever, right? They have set up manufacturing facilities in Vietnam, but they would have to bring with them the suppliers of the parts. And so I think that's whether we call it China or whether we call it geopolitics. I think the next step in the development of globalization is just outsourcing the manufacturing basis of consumer brands.
Did we see when I was here for the HORASIS Asia meeting, I held up my two iPhones. One was assembled in China, and the other one was assembled in India, and both of them both the same models. Could we see an iPhone assembled here in Vietnam?
Definitely, of course. I think
Very soon.
I think Apple has probably put in the plan by starting to make certain components or certain products. I think Apple has already started making AirPods in Vietnam or headsets or whatever. And I think that it's natural that the next step would be for Foxconn to start assembling the iPhone to the iPad and what have you.
Now, before I go to Nura, one question. You mentioned EVs, BYD. Now, Vietnam has its own EV companies. So, are we seeing the entry of Chinese aspirants creating a very competitive environment in that kind of niche, for example, that kind of industry?
Yeah, I think if you look at Vietnam's economy, and of course Vietnam's economy is still small relative to, say, that of China or that of Japan and Korea. So Vietnam is going to be used more as a manufacturing base rather than a consumer market. For sure, Vietnam's consumer market is growing, But as I mentioned before, I don't think Cherry is going to let all the cars in Vietnam to sell to the Vietnamese consumers. The same with VinFast. VinFast is not going to make cars in Vietnam just to sell to the Vietnamese consumers. As a matter of fact, we work with a company called Paco, who is the biggest car assembler in Vietnam. They make a lot of Mazda and Kia, primarily for the Vietnam market, but they also have to export quite a bit. As long as those, I think in terms of the distribution network, they have to balance it out with other manufacturing bases in the region, including Thailand and Indonesia. So I think, as I mentioned in Vietnam, there is a budding, a growing middle-class consumer market, but I don't think it's what people are going after. Yes, it will be competitive nonetheless, and yes, the Vietnamese companies are growing their own brands, including VinFast, for example, to try to capture the local market. But I think it's fair enough for a lot of consumer products in Vietnam, and soon enough you will have Vietnamese brands competing with Haier, for example, and Haier is now competing with Toshiba, for example. So I think the market is going to grow and be able to accommodate a lot of different brands, but I think it's just a natural evolution of the brand and the affinity towards their niche market.
So we could see kind of new wave of Vietnam.
Yeah, well, VinFast, for example, has already started to export their cars to different countries. I think we have to take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, so to speak, but I think there is a natural course of involvement, evolution for products.
Great, thank you very much. Now, Nora, if I could tap your knowledge from your part of the world, you're making the Caspian region great again. And so tell us a little bit about BRI and China's outreach, particularly on the energy side, but China is kind of recasting the Belt and Road Initiative, and that kind of is important for this part of Vietnam and this part of the world, but certainly from the part of the world where you're from.
Certainly. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, I would like to say really that we are very grateful to Dr. Frank Richter to bringing us here together. I'm third time in this Pindong province, in this nice place. And each time I'm coming to different meetings. Now it's a HORASIS China meeting, and I'm getting new friends, like members of our big HORASIS family, and thank you for this. And also thank you for the Pindong province management for that hospitality. Really great. Especially yesterday's concert was exceptional. And now back to the question. Yes, you are right. Belt and Road Initiative is extremely important for the Greater Caspian region. And just to remind, the Greater Caspian region, it's 15 countries from east side and west side of the Caspian Sea, including Central Asia, Afghanistan and Pakistan, Caucasus, and the Black Sea countries, starting between Turkey and Kazakhstan. And what we see, China has a significant influence in the region, and we saw this. We were very enthusiastic before the COVID pandemic started. There were a lot of projects that China helped to implement and finance and invested. Even I was the part of the Swiss delegation when we signed the memorandum for strategic cooperation for Belt and Road Initiative for the third markets. Like Switzerland was supposed to be kind of a bridge between China and the Belt and Road markets. Unfortunately, the COVID pandemic started, everything was disrupted. China was closed down for several years, and then we got the news that according to the new 5-year plan, I think it was 2021, China will concentrate on domestic circulation, and they will slow down the Belt and Road projects. For us, it was a little bit shock because we were really a lot of hopes. Luckily, now China is open again, and we saw already that the new declaration from China that now they would like to revitalize those new projects. And this is a great support for Greater Caspian region, because our region is the heart of the ancient Silk Road between Europe and China. And whatever you will invent, but geographically the shortest way between China and Europe is going through the Caspian region, and this for more than 2,000 years. That's why we see the great potential, and now I will a little bit go into details for a couple of minutes, just to explain what is already existing. And China is I think the biggest investor to Kazakhstan today for a lot of projects. And China developing several mega projects in Turkmenistan, mainly related to natural gas production, exploration and production. And Turkmenistan, before the Russian war started, was the biggest supplier of natural gas to China. And China was the biggest market for Turkmenistan. It was a mutual beneficial cooperation on a really large scale. I will tell you the numbers, about 35 to 38 billion cubic meters, not it's per annum, was supplied by the pipeline. And I just told to my colleagues, my friends, that Chinese companies managed to build 7,000 kilometer gas pipeline in 18 months. And nobody believed that this is in the theory possible, but this was done. And now we were going a little bit west, we have Georgia. Georgia, the unique country which has a free trade agreement with China and with the European Union. That's why Georgia could be the hub for the Chinese goods for further processing in Georgia and then supplying to the European Union and vice versa. And also other countries are very much involved and doing business with China. I can talk about Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. China is very active even in Afghanistan. Recently I got news that the new tunnel was built through the mountains to connect Afghanistan with China, but I think this is a great initiative also, and also Pakistan and so on. That's why we are really, we see that there is a big potential, there is a big hope for the cooperation between the Greater Caspian region and China.
The Belt and Road Initiative was launched just over 10 years ago, and we're supposed to be in a kind of Belt and Road 2.0, where there's been a readjustment, not just of oversight and issues like that, because of course there was a lot of criticism about that diplomacy and such, but also in terms of the size of some of these projects, as well as the approach that China was taking. Previously, they were taking a kind of big China kind of approach, and it was becoming a little bit more modest, let me put it that way. From your perspective, given that you are really looking, the region that you look at is looking at the forefront of that Belt and Road Initiative footprint, or you're really under that footprint. How do you see the Belt and Road Initiative changing, particularly also in terms of the impact? What has been the impact so far, and how is China adjusting the BRI from your perspective to make it perhaps more effective?
First of all, we'd like to remind you that 11 years ago, Belt and Road Initiative was born in Kazakhstan. When Chairman Xi came to Kazakhstan with a visit, and he did his great speech in the university and announced the Belt and Road Initiative. This was the beginning. Now, yes, at the beginning, the approach was a bit aggressive, but for our region, maybe it was not so aggressive like it was in other parts of the world, like Africa and so on. That's why at the end some projects started to move. And also I would like to tell you a little bit of the history that historically our region was mainly the part of the Soviet Union. And in the Soviet Union was, let's say, empire style of doing things. Like in Moscow, there was a decision to build 5,000 kilometer railway. And then the whole Soviet Union was concentrating on building the railway. For example, you know, there is the biggest in the world channel, Karakum channel in Turkmenistan. In Moscow, they decided to dig this channel, more than 1,000 kilometers from the Amudara River, in order to bring water to the reserve regions of Turkmenistan, in order to increase production of cotton. And this was done, and just in a few years, the whole Soviet Union was working there. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, resources of each particular country became not enough to build the mega projects. That's why or we were needed to consolidate resources for all the region to do something big. Or we need the partner, the big partner who can afford to invest thousands of billions of dollars and to perform such projects. And China today, I think this is the most logical partner for it. First of all, geographically it's quite close, because let's say United States is a bit far away, Europe, sorry to say, is a bit weak now and fragmented, and Russia is other stuff, the politics, and China could cover this gap, like after Soviet Union disappeared, and do the big projects with the help of the, of course, of the countries of the region, with the help of the local partners, local companies, and local people. And here I'm not afraid that it will be that trap or so on, because first of all, and this was potentially the role of Switzerland suggested in 2019, that Switzerland could become kind of intermediary for such projects and bring in Chinese investment channeling to Switzerland with the Swiss business ethics, Swiss business mentality for the region. But let's see what will happen. But I'm not afraid. Important is to do the good things. And how to structure this is secondary.
Great, thank you very much. Now we're going to shift from having talked about China's economic conditions, the challenges China's facing, then we talked about China's relationship with Vietnam region and the greater Caspian region. We're going to shift because business dynamism also depends a lot on what companies themselves are doing in terms of strategy. And so, Elizabeth, if I might, can you talk a bit about the challenge of technology and how, what challenges do businesses face in adapting to the fourth industrial revolution age, adopting technology in order to ensure that they can continue to be dynamic?
First of all, thank you so much for a friend, for inviting me here, and I'm so honored to be the only lady amongst very accomplished gentlemen, so thank you. On the topic of technology, I think nowadays, we're facing both the critical challenges globally. We talked about, geopolitics, climate, we mentioned yesterday, ESG, and so on. These are all challenges that not only businesses face, but people face. But at the same time, if we take another spin and look, in Chinese, 危机, 危 is also 机会, right? So crisis is also opportunity. So how do we turn this critical juncture in history and turn that into the greatest opportunity, especially now that technology is developing so quick. It's expanding and developing at an exponential level. As we all know, generative AI with ChatGPT and many others coming up, that's only one type of technology. There are many others. In fact, the World Economic Forum, of which I'm part of as a global shaker, they also have a report on the top 10 emerging technologies that are likely to be disrupting our world. For better or worse, it really is technology as a tool, like fire, like electricity, right? That people can use to do good or to do harm. So in a practice of mindfulness and mindful leadership, it's all about how do we first frame the challenge as an opportunity, and then how do we then use these technology as enabler and as tools to solve important challenges for this generation and the coming generations, and for us to be better ancestors. So, some examples of technologies that are coming up. Gen AI, of course. The second is also flexible batteries. So in the future, flexible batteries will make our screens rollable, but also embed that into our clothes, for example. And that has immense potential also in healthcare. how we can then monitor all our biosensors and so on. Designer phages. These are engineering viruses that can be used to augment human, plant, and animal health. Right? There's also metaverse coming up. That's for mental health, emerging interaction, and many others. But I've also worked in Monitor Deloitte as a chief of staff and strategic consultant. And oftentimes businesses are trying to do digital transformation. They look for consulting firms. But actually, when we through all these phases, the most challenging part for any business to do this type of technological transformation, digital transformation, is actually not really the technology itself, but rather it's the people. Because it's the people who are going to be using it, are going to be designing it. Are they willing to change the way of work? Are they willing to change their business model to adapt to these new technologies? And that's the biggest part, which is also why now in Unicorns for Good, we're also especially working on mindful leadership. So how do we bring the top leaders in an organization to adopt this mindful mentality that is not ingrained and fixed, but actually is open, non-biased, non-judgmental, and embracing of opportunities and challenges, and using technology as a force for good to create returns for people, planet, and profit.
Interesting. Now, I recall that when we had our discussion breakout group just a couple of hours ago on discussing STEM education, is it necessary for growth? You were there. And so I have to then ask, right, what is your perspective in terms of, because you brought up the issue of it's a people issue, people challenge to one extent. What are we doing right and wrong in terms of, I mean, is STEM education so necessary, or do we need to be more open-minded about the kind of education we need in order that businesses can remain dynamic and approach technology in a way that ensures that they'll continue to grow?
Many countries are focusing on STEM education. And right now what we see is very deep expertise. We're going very deep in a specific vertical. But actually what is also needed is also thinking about the purpose. Because in the past 2 years, I've actually toured around the world and visited over 100 most innovative organizations from the whole lab to market value chain of technology. So from universities to research labs, to science parks, for good companies, investors, family offices, and so on. What I find most precious is actually some of these organizations that at the core, they have purpose, that they want to use technology to solve a real important challenge that we're facing, whether it's people or it's planet. So I think for one part is the very technical expertise that we're developing through STEM education is great. But what I think will be really important in this era is the bridge of application, the technology application that's not just making things cheaper, better, faster, higher quality, but actually, can this actually improve someone's life? Can this actually make this planet more livable and sustainable in the future? So that is a key question. How do we embed this mindfulness in all the engineers, in all the technologists, and in all the leaders that are with such power to create very powerful technology?
And do you see that happening in China, in this part of the world, in the ASEAN, in the region? Are enough businesses take that kind of approach?
It's, I think there's a wave of consciousness that's coming. I think the Scandinavian countries, for example, Sweden, Finland, and so on, they are very much high up in the purpose. So, in fact, a lot of the organizations that we visited, they said, if what we're doing is not for purpose and not for impact, then why do we do it? But I think this mentality yet has to really come to this region, although I do also see very passionate entrepreneurs using tech for good. For example, an Asian entrepreneur who is using technology to split carbon dioxide into carbon and into water. And the carbon will then be used as fertilizer for the soil. So that can also be used in very dry areas to help with food security, because water will be an issue, fresh water will be an issue. So things like this, we do see it's coming, but I think we need a collective push to remind why we do things in the first place.
So kind of need for innovation and creativity, but innovation because we actually bringing these creative ideas to the market is kind of important. So we're going to go to King Roger. And King Roger, Dwayne already brought up the fact that many of the businesses that we're talking about here in this part of the world in China, a lot of them are, family businesses. I actually would like to reintroduce you. That you are adjunct professor, senior advisor, and founding director of the Roger King Center for Asian Family Business and Family Office at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and you're senior advisor and founding director of the Thompson Center for Business and Studies, also at Hong Kong University. So from that perch in the ivory tower, King Roger, can you tell us how are these kinds of companies, these family companies, trying to remain dynamic despite all the changes that we talked about, and they're kind of seen as being still old style, but they've got to change. And how is that happening? Is it happening?
Well, thank you. It's on. That comes out by itself. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think the issue of family business itself is very, very important. In fact, you may or may not be aware of it. Most economies, the largest portion of businesses is actually family owned. If you take a country like Germany, 2/3 of the contribution, GDP contribution, are from family businesses itself. Okay? So this is why they focus on, I want to take a little bit back to the structure of the businesses itself. And so we're living in a very, very different world today, changing the world, part of the title itself. And there are two obvious changes. Number one is that we're all living longer, right? Lifespan, many of you in this room probably have relatives or friends, or whatever, that's close to 100 or even more than 100 years old. So human lifespan is increasing all the time. But the problem is, as mentioned by Evan, the business life cycle is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Okay? And the question is that, are people adjusted well enough to change their business model and stuff? Now, we focus a little bit more on China, but this is actually true for most economies anyway. In China, you're really talking about from first to second generation family business itself. So many of the founders are still around. And, they are in businesses that are very, very traditional. They don't really know how to change, based on technology and this and that and so forth. This is one of the biggest problems one has. And the way they run the business is, they control everything. They don't trust outsiders. They want to make all the decisions. Okay? This is probably true in Vietnam as well. I'm just guessing. Okay? Guess what? The next generation, all these very successful businesses, they send their children overseas to study. When they come back, guess what? 80+% do not want to join the family business. Then the question is, what happens then? For Asians, passing the business on to the next generation is very, very important. This is part of our culture itself. But if the next generation is not willing to take the business, right? Why? They want to do their own thing. They're much more interested in technology-oriented businesses rather than manufacturing. Okay? So this is one of the biggest challenges these days. The idea of next gen taking over the business itself. And, I'm quoting the Shanghai Jiao University did a study 7 years back. It actually showed 80+% in the next generation. But what happens to the family business? They sell it, give it away, or hire professional people. Well, to most first generation, none of those are actually acceptable alternatives. Okay? This is very, very challenging. So, Al, you mentioned that I've been involved with university for quite some time, and teaching and research and so forth. One of the classes I teach is how does one sell a family business? Okay? When the founder is there, it's very emotional for them to sell a business. So it's not easy to sell a family. How about hiring professional managers for the family? That they don't like that also. Why? Because a lot of it is relationship businesses, this part of the world, called social capital. And if you hire someone that's very, very intelligent, smart, they work for you, pretty soon they know everything about your business, they become your competitor. Okay? So this is another problem. So what does one do about the business? This is one of the key challenges. Okay? One thing that was raised earlier was, you talk about the Chinese investment in parts of, incidentally, the Chinese, overseas Chinese are very, very successful, especially in Southeast Asia. You take a country like, I don't know if it's true necessarily in Vietnam, but Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, you take the 10 top richest persons in those countries. I guarantee you half of them are ethnic. Okay? So the question is that, how do they pass this wealth on to future generations? One of the challenges. So we're facing a different kind of challenge because business life cycle is getting so short because of technology. Talk about AI, talk about the Internet of Things, and stuff. Living through Industrial Revolution 4.0 and stuff. I mean, some of you don't remember, these so-called smartphones. When I was first using these smartphones, it's the size of a brick, so big. Today, it's more computing power in your smartphone and, let's say 20 years, 30 years ago, the largest computer never had it. So we're facing a different kind of challenge, especially if you introduce the element of family.
Now, many people would then say, you shift from a family that knows how to do business, is always went to professional managers, and the dynamism is gone, the mojo is gone. Does your research bear out that kind of narrative?
Well, this is it. The question is that, the idea of switching from manager and ownership to pure manager, pure owner, okay? That's also very, very challenging. Okay? So the question is that, you may start a listed company, you have already still controlling ownership from itself. The question is that, because our culture is that next generation is very, very important, our role is to ensure that they have a good or better life than us. So the question is, they don't want to join the family business. What are we passing on? So this is something that one has to.
Okay, now I'm mindful that we have about 5 minutes left, and I might go like a couple of minutes over, because I'm going to institute a kind of lightning round, where I'm going to go through the panel in the same order, but I'm going to ask you to really keep your reply brief, short. So, for you, Dwayne, you have talked about the Chinese economic challenges, the business challenges, and I think most people will agree, whatever spin or whatever, that China is having serious economic challenges and structural challenges. What's the outlook? When will China get out of the woods, and what should we look for? I mean, very briefly, I'm sorry, but
So I think China will eventually get out of the woods, and while certain segments of the economy will be challenging, there are also new segments of the economy that's bringing a lot of dynamisms and a lot of new creativity. So I think the new part of it will bring the entrenched and existing part of China along. And is that new part private or will we see it in states? I think it would have to be private enterprise that would have the energy and crazy. Wait, now I'm going to go to Suchar. Suchar, brand management. This seems to be like Hire's superpower in many ways, and that you've actually been patient in developing that kind of brand strategy in order to avoid some of the geopolitics. So going forward, do you foresee what is the outlook for Hire in Vietnam? Where are you heading? In particular, in an ASEAN context, is that how it is? Very quickly.
So I think the company will focus on the brand image. Second, will focus on the product, how to reach the requirement, the customer need, requirement. These are high technology. And then we build the rebuild of supply chain, localization and globalization. We also teach technology about digitalization and AI technology. Even this is global. When we do business in the Philippines, what the Philippines, what's the customer? Where? So what's the customer? Requirements. What's the customer? When? This means each market in focus on. Then build grade. So when you do the globalization and the localization, we define the more challenge for the business strategy. We bring the value, we bring the added value to the local people. This means we bring the value to Vietnam. We bring value to America. We bring further for customer. We conduct the supply chain more efficiently. Use the high technology for products for manufacturing. This is our thinking in global.
Right now, Johan, Vietnam has been regaled to a large extent these days as the great balancer in the U.S.-China competition. Xi Jinping visited here last year, and Biden also visited. Going forward, is Vietnam going to continue to be able to successfully manage that kind of balancing act, of which is now regarded as a master?
Yes, I think that
Well, I think Vietnam can do that naturally.
Yes.
I think Vietnam can do it naturally, and I think Vietnam fits right in. Not only in terms of geopolitics, but also in terms of the globalization of brands. As I mentioned earlier, I think they have gone through brand globalization 1.0, which was American brands and European brands. 2.0 was probably regional brands like Japanese and Korean. 3.0 is already here, I think, with the Chinese brands expanding further, both in terms of capturing the Vietnamese consumer market, but also using Vietnam as a manufacturing base to expand to other countries. And who knows, maybe in the not too distant future, there will be a 4.0 version with Vietnamese brands competing with Chinese brands, but also expanding in their own way in certain parts of the world, including being fast, including, for example, FPT. So I mentioned FPT is a great name because nobody outside of Vietnam hears of it, but I was in Japan last month and I visited an FPT shop, and they have 3,500 engineers based in Japan alone, just rolling out products from Japanese and North Asian market. So I think the Vietnamese brands will have an opportunity to fit in with the globalization of the brands 4.0.
Great. Murat, all the conflict in the world, geopolitics, that we've seen, still have the Ukraine war, Israel Hamas, and Iran's now come into the picture. What is your sense in terms of, because your part of the world tends to be more affected by all of this, especially the Eurasia kind of connection. Are you concerned at all? Where do you see it developing?
Of course, we are concerned in our region because we are right in the middle between two big conflicts. Russia, China, from the north, and in the south, we have now Israel, Hamas, Iran, and so on. And on top of that, there was a conflict which was resolved between Azerbaijan and Armenia, right in the center of. No, it's now resolved. It's now resolved, just a matter of time when the peace agreement will be signed and the new borders will be fixed. It's a matter of, I think, maybe 1 year maximum, in my view. And for the region is a big problem because what we are facing now, region got a high risk pressure in the banks. Very difficult now to get investments to the region. Very difficult to get even financing, even for trade for them. Because banks just see on the map, okay, there is a huge war here, the problem here, we don't know, better we stay away, better we wait. It's bringing the disruption of the trade, of course, and we all hope that all these conflicts will be resolved as soon as possible. I hope so, maybe in the horizon of 1 year, all these these two problems will be resolved. But this is a major concern for the region.
Right. It is very that ESG. Sometimes people that nowadays people talk about getting rid of it or ignoring it. Or I mean, do you see ESG as continuing possibly to regain momentum, if you will, because there seems to be a kind of backlash against these in parts of the corporate sector.
Whether it is ESG education, and that's also why with Unicorn Spirit, we're working very hard at cultivating conscious leaders, both at the very top business leaders level, C-suite founders, as well as the next gens that you've mentioned, and to the corporate teams and organizations, such that this becomes a movement that's not just about regulation, it's not just about KPI, but it's actually something that we each of us truly care about and that we push this. It's a critical moment where we become the generation that creates a shift, it's a new civilization from industrial civilization to a conscious civilization.
Finally, King Roger, is the next generation capable? We've talked a lot about how education, social media is deteriorating people's minds, creativity, and is the next generation even capable of being as creative and innovative as their forefathers and foreparents?
Yeah.
Not just
You talk about capability, it's very, of course, capability is very, very important. But to me, to be successful in life, one has to be passionate, whatever that is. Okay? So the question is that we as parents or grandparents, you've got to make sure that future generations have a passion, whatever they do. That passion
Còn ở đây
may
quay
be
mấy
part of
cảnh
your
cuối thì
business,
hãy
may
xuống
not be part of
R1
it.
nữa Toàn.
Okay? But the key is that make sure they have a passion somewhere. So for me, I have this acronym what I call CCKP. Sorry. You have to have these 4 characteristics to succeed in life. The first C is, are you confident whatever you do? Second C is commitment. Are you committed? K is knowledge. You know what you're doing. Finally, P is passion. These are the 4 elements you must have. Otherwise, you can't succeed in them.
right. So I can guarantee you that off this panel, everybody has a certain passion. You've seen it, exhibited, and the one person I know who's extremely passionate about everything that we're doing is Frank Jürgen Richter, and I just wanted to thank him very much and the HORASIS group for bringing us together and convening the session. I'm 5 minutes, 6 minutes over. I apologize for that, but thank you very much. Please thank the panel. Thank you.
Đâu?